And I think this is a very good segue for you next, Judy Annette. The ICN research project that you are leading is described as aligning with the sectoral-wide shift towards more feminist, anti-racist, and decolonial approaches in international cooperation work, where increasingly organizations are proactively interrogating their principles and practice. And while this is a positive step towards decolonizing the sector, this reflexivity exercise and the actions that result from it need to be done in a way that does not propagate the same harmful practices and or produce new forms of harmful practice. So this is the basis of the research. So this has just started recently, but maybe you can tell us about what approaches you are taking to bring CSOs together in this exploration, and what are some of the challenges for grassroots organizations. And anything else that Andriane may have tagged on that makes sense for you to speak to.
Thanks, Kim. I think I want to first respond to the question that you have there about having, how can we have the most oppressed voices heard. I like that you've shifted it a bit from including them to actually hearing them. And then I will go on and talk a little bit about the our approaches to the research and some of the challenges for the grassroots organizations. So I think it's being more intentional in how we listen, because I feel like we're having conversations about bringing these voices or these communities to the table, including them, but not actually listening. And I like the idea of actively listening, because that signals that there's some form of action involved. And so not only listening to these voices, but looking at what sort of work is going on in those communities and what sort of knowledges are being produced there. And that relates very well to Andriane's project. And so I like Andriane's question, and if I can pick up on what you said there about who produces knowledges, and also add there whose knowledge counts, and then move on to talk about our approach in this research, where we've gathered both CSOs from Canadian CSOs and global CSOs, but also including individuals who are doing community work in their local areas. And so it's important for us, especially as the ICN, the collective, to create a space where we can gather people from different contexts, people coming from different geographies, different histories, and even social political context. And so it's important to create a space where we can gather these CSOs and individuals and activists to come and co-produce knowledge in this regard and hopefully shape policy. So as I said, we just recruited participants, and we have a very diverse and rich pool of participants. And so we just now starting the first phase. So I will talk a little bit about what we're thinking of doing. So as I said, we're looking at this as I said at the beginning, we're looking at this as a learning process. So even how we recruited people, how we brought these people together, that is in itself, the method is in itself is a learning process. And that's, we look at that as a site where some decolonizing work can happen. And so, you know, in terms of like what sort of knowledges are these people bringing, and how do these knowledges that will produce within that research, looking at, because we're really interested in how these commitments and all these discussions we've been having as a sector, how that translates into practice, and looking at things like how CSOs navigating power, how are they navigating tensions, and how are they responding to the challenges that come with doing this kind of work. So that's the main goal for this research. And so it's important to not only have the same kinds of CSOs, but to bring really different people and different organizations doing different work. Some of the people that we've recruited, some of them are working towards climate change. Some of them are working in leading social movements, and it's important to bring people who are working in very different areas in their communities to try and see how we can collectively, decolonize our approaches, or just think about new ways of doing things, moving away from what we've already, been doing. And talking about what Karen talked about, the colonial structures and how we can imagine different structures. And so so that's our approach. We have two phases for this research, and we'll have focus groups with these people. And so we're just beginning, but we'll share findings as we go. But I want to answer your second question here, came about the challenges for grassroots organizations. So we've already done 2 roundtables, and that was such an introduction. We wanted to first do roundtables and then recruit participants to take part in focus groups. And so we had a really rich conversation with the people that we brought together for these roundtables, and I think I'll just highlight a few of the challenges that grassroots organizations are facing. So I think one of the big one here is digital divide, especially now with the work shifting to more virtual spaces like this one, which is great because it's expanded the ways people can take part in public engagement activities. But also that means that people who are already marginalized, or people who are this most oppressed voices that we're talking about, some of these people will further get marginalized if they have no access to devices, or if they have no access to stable internet, which we need for to take part in these virtual activities. And so for grassroots organizations, the challenge has been trying to reach those people who will be excluded because of the lack of devices. And so they've had to be very intentional about how they make sure that these people keep taking part in these activities. And one of the things that we had from some of the CSOs, I think it's one of them working in, it must have been Botswana, it's these people are using local community leaders to make sure that the local community leaders can then go on to the people and make sure that they're also included, the people who have no access. The other challenge, which is related to this, is inadequate resources. So we heard from grassroots organizations that it's been a challenge, as we all know, for them to access funding, stable and long-term funding. And this affects their ability to work, their internal operations as organizations, but also for the communities that they work with and support. And so that's another challenge. And when we're thinking about decolonizing, this is an important lesson here about how we fund organizations and the funding infrastructures that we have in place. But of course, we know that there's been organizations that are leading the way in changing how we resource grassroots organizations like FRIDA, the fund. So we all have a lot to learn as a sector in terms of funding organizations, especially grassroots organizations. And finally, I think what I want to highlight, another challenge here is for the grassroots organization, and I mentioned this a bit, with the virtual way of doing things now, and having virtual public engagement activities, it means that we're reaching more people and we're doing more activities, which is great. But then the challenge for grassroots organizations is how to make that engagement meaningful, right? So we're not just coming into events for 2 hours, but we for the communities that they work with, that it's not only participating for the sake of it, but it's meaningful, it's participatory, and it's also transformative. So there's a challenge there in terms of trying to make sure that the work, the impact of the work goes beyond the activities that we're doing. I think that's, I will leave it there, and I will share some of the insights from the roundtables, some more insights from the roundtables later on.
Thanks so much. There's so much here. I hope all of you are following along. Even in the transcript, you can see it in the chat if you're trying to capture the depth of the richness here of what we can take away. And again, as you said, Judy-Annette, this is just the beginning of the research. There's even a session today that you're leading, a webinar to talk more about this. And this is just kicking off. So I think from my perspective, what I know about our sector, and especially many of small and medium-sized organizations in this community that we're in, there's a lot of questions to grapple with, but it is through this kind of transparency and open dialogue around what are the actual barriers and what are the actual approaches that we can further this work. So thank you for that.